AI isn't some side experiment in filmmaking. It's already used in major Hollywood productions. Last year alone, The Brutalist, it de-aged Tom Hanks and Robin Wright in Here and seamlessly blended Anya Taylor-Joy's face with her younger counterpart in Furiosa. So AI, it's changing who gets to make films, how fast they come together, and what's even possible. But here's the problem though. Most creatives either get lost in the tech or end up making AI clips that feel like half-baked demos. I'm sure you've all seen them. So today, we're focusing on what works, and for this episode, I've got two guests who are impassively watching the shift. They're helping build the playbook. We got Fred Greenstein, whose work across film and TV, producing, buying, and developing content for A&E, Vice, and anonymous content. Now as a co-founder of Machine Cinema, he's pushing AI filmmaking from experiment to real production. And Mr. Mindo here, who spent years in tech, venture capital, and Web3, baking companies at the intersection of AI and content. And at Machine Cinema, he's developing workflows that make AI filmmaking viable, turning it from novelty into a real creative tool. So if you stick around till the end, we're breaking down real workflows, the biggest mistakes new AI creators are making, and where this is all headed next, including the big elephant in the room, who actually benefits from all of this. So, Fred, you've worked in both traditional Hollywood and AI filmmaking, right? And a lot of AI studios, from what I hear out there in the streets, see themselves as partners to Hollywood, not disruptors, right? But studios still worry about the legal and creative risks. Now, where do you think the industry really stands as of today?
So do you mean like the legacy side of it or the incoming?
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, I think like there's what is being said out loud, and there might even be the quiet part that people are saying out loud, and there might just be the part that's not being said out loud. I mean, I think most of the history of like traditional Hollywood has embraced technology. I think a lot of people get excited about the way Walt Disney introduced a lot of interesting innovations in his time. So I think it's its own statement that as this sort of chapter has arrived, there seems to be not this sort of welcome breath of fresh air. I mean, I think it's hard to forget that I think to some extent films like Everything Everywhere All at Once used some kind of AI that won a whole bunch of awards and was celebrated for its innovation and creativity. The Irishman, Martin Scorsese on Netflix used some kind of, aging tools or de-aging tools. So I guess like it feels like something just happened, but like anything, it's been happening. And there's something about it happening right now that is very noisy, and it sort of attracts a lot of headlines and attention. And I personally think that's mostly related to what's been happening unrelated to AI. And I think that's kind of defining the conversation between the legacy and the newcomers. I think the newcomers are just like any other moment of VFX or any kind of new innovation that they come in and saying, hey, what if we did things this way? And sometimes these people come bearing gifts because there's ways to find efficiencies, or there's ways to do things in innovative ways. I'm not oblivious to the fact that the economics are very clear, that the history of VFX getting sort of really, really pulled back by these innovations is real. And there's a lot of real people actually currently, there's a lot of VFX studios shutting down now. Whether or not those are direct relationships with AI is open for debate. So I think I feel all of those emotions is what's happening. I don't think it's actually a clear dynamic, but I do think you hear ostensibly a lot of pushback. There's a lot of actually very like high-minded people that are really making a case for the ethical concerns and the copyright issues. I think, when you look at the business of the studios that have, this is what I say, like either it's the quiet part they're not saying. I think it seems to be an open secret that a lot of people are obviously aggressively finding solutions that help their studio businesses. So I think there's a lot that's just not really being played out in public. And I think the more emotional part is playing out in public. And I think it's all relevant, frankly. I think everybody should really be finding their way through this. But I think these new studios, I think to me are as exciting as any new wave of new creators that I think when I meet the people behind the scenes and interact with them, they're mostly just really creative people, really excited to try things in often very fresh-minded ways.
And I like what you said, right? There's a lot of emotion involved in the conversation, which is something I don't hear that much when I'm listening to other podcasts, or reading articles. Again, we're talking about the creative industries. Creatives, we're very sensitive. We're very in touch with our emotions, which is what makes usually storytelling and creation possible, right? And then you got, like we were talking other times, the internet by its whole nature, we need to keep the eyes. The way to keep the eyes is with inflammatory things. So you see a lot of it's all bad, it's all good. And I think podcasts like this one, talking to you folks, are trying to see what's in the middle, right? The nuance. And so we kind of like bring down the temperature on this conversation and we can focus on, okay, what can we do no matter what side of the equation we're on? I mean, you're someone that has built an online presence as an AI educator, among many other things. So I'm sure you have lots of conversations with these new AI creatives, AI filmmakers that Fred was referencing that are super excited. Now, let's say a filmmaker, a content creator, they want to start using AI. And you've heard these questions 10,000 times. I'm sorry, just give me something a little bit different. But like, right, you're overwhelmed. Now, what's the first step for the person that today, for the first time watching this episode, it's kind of like, okay, fuck it. Today's the day that I start learning these tools. What's the first step you take? And then is there such a thing as a workflow hack that could save time without sacrificing quality?
I guess, one, I don't only see myself as an AI educator. I think I've had a very illustrious kind of fun career playing around with a lot of things. I was in venture capital, I was a journalist, entrepreneur. And so AI educator maybe as like one aspect of something that I like to do. And I think I've embraced it as something I love because I love to teach. I think my advice for people's first jumping into AI would just be, you have to try it, right? And I think that most people are anyway with ChatGPT, right? When ChatGPT came out, you have now 400 million weekly active users after 2 years, which is a staggering number. So a lot of people are playing. When we're starting to look at things like Runway, Sora, Midjourney, etc., I think most people are very intimidated at first, and it just takes like trying for a little bit to really start to get a feel for what's possible. I think most people they think it's harder than it is. And then when they get into it, it's like, oh my God, it is a version of the text prompting that we see on ChatGPT. It's just that it's speaking a different language in some ways. It's like talking to a dog or talking to a 2-year-old or 3-year-old. You can't really communicate with perfect English, right? You have to kind of communicate in language that it might understand. You have to think about it in terms of weights. Right. That's how I tend to think about, okay, if I send Midjourney, if I attach an image to Midjourney and use that as a reference, that is weight. So are my words that I use to talk to Midjourney, right? If I say like horses walking down the street and I have an image that is attached to that, every single word that I use plus that image that I send is all weight. And how do I think about how that influences what the end result is? Right. Which is a slightly different way of how we talk to ChatGPT, which is sometimes we kind of say everything, right? We kind of say every little detail. We try to be very detailed on what we want to come back to us. Whereas here in the case of sending very simple words, maybe nouns and actions, then that's the result. Right. So yeah, those are a few things that I usually try to start people off with.
And what's, because one of the challenges when we're using these tools is that the credits, I'm paying for them, they can quickly add up. And it's, you're just getting started. You can spend quite a sizable amount of money. So are there any tools that you see sort of as the Fisher Price of AI animation, kind of like these are the ones that will sort of teach you those rudimentary basics. So then you can start playing with the big ones where actual money is involved and create something more professional or polished.
I guess Krea, maybe Quandr, maybe FreePic. There's a few, I would say, aggregators, and then who are trying to like kind of combine a lot of different tools into one. Nim as well, it's another one. And then there's tools, and Runway even as well. And then there's tools that are very specific, that are very good at what they do. Maybe it's Midjourney, maybe it's Kling or whatever. I don't want to play favorites, but I do think that Midjourney is, to most people in the creative space, kind of almost like a gateway drug in a way, right? Where you are trying out Midjourney for the first time, you end up spending hours and hours and hours trying to get it to do certain things that you want. It gives you different things, and you kind of refine your palette on what types of art that you want to do with AI. It kind of teaches you in the process. I mean, I heard recently that a majority of the people that use Midjourney are using it for therapy, not for art, right? Because there's this kind of dialogue that's happening. People want to visualize what's happening inside of them rather than just being artists and visualizing what they want to do and put out to people. So that's kind of interesting.
A majority? Did you say a majority? Or
Majority. And so I think there's kind of it's hard to really say what I think is the best tool. I think that there are some tools that are better to get you started, like Midjourney. There's other tools that have everything, can also be overwhelming. And the huge caveat is who knows where this is all going, right? I mean, it changes on a day-to-day basis. Today, I might say, hey, look, Google, the GFE, or what we call Google Flash Experimental, is very impressive for its editing capabilities, but who knows if even tomorrow, someone else is going to come out with something even more impressive. And so I think it's more important that you just choose one, play around with it, and start to get your feet wet. And then you start to get used to what is possible. I think most people who are like entry level, relatively speaking, like AI artists, are probably spending like $50 a month. But you could end up easily spending up to 500 to thousands of dollars a month if you're working on real creative projects, and you're like working with clients and things like that. You might end up being like hitting the refresh button on credits over and over again, end up paying thousands of dollars just to get one video done. So yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like, I want to highlight what you just said, right? With professional projects, how you can like rack up a bill in the thousands, because I think one of the biggest misconceptions when we talk about generating video with AI is that you just press a button and you're going to get a perfect video where everything looks exactly as intended. And many times, correct me if I'm wrong, the reality of generating this video is that you're going to need many takes, many times until you reach that result that you're looking for. Is this correct?
Yeah, I think, even for me, I probably re-roll, as I like to say, or refresh or what have you, like about 20 to 40 times per a shot that I want. Sometimes I get it right away, which is uncanny. But yeah, and same thing with Midjourney. Sometimes in an image, I'm, refreshing, 10, 20, maybe even 100 times to get the thing that I want, right? So, and then there's a relationship that you have there of when do you cut your losses? When do you stop? Because you could go all night, you could go all day trying to get the exact shot, So there's a balance there that everybody kind of finds.
Okay, so would you say that balance is personal? Like, what's your recommendation? When do you cut your losses?
It kind of depends on the project. I think, I've worked with directors who want something very specific. There is no cutting your losses. You have to keep going until you find that exact shot that suits the moment. And then there are other times where, let's say I'm doing my own project, like it's a film that I've been working on for a while. I do a lot of like poem films, because I like poetry. And so like that I kind of lean into the AI of it, right? The creativity of it. And I just kind of like, hey, this kind of looks weird and funny. It's got a little blemish here, but you know what? I want to move forward. I want to finish this thing in a week. So maybe it's like 20 shots before I say yes.
Yeah. So just like any creative project, sometimes you have more budget to blow up. Sometimes you got to make it work.
That's right.
With 2 coins. Just like, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Fred, I want to go back, zooming into your industry experience now for a minute, because one of the conversations you folks might hear all the time when we're talking about AI-generated filmmaking, AI creativity, is IP and attribution. And I know neither of us are, none of us are lawyers. This is not legal advice. We don't know shit. We're just talking shop here. So, Fred, IP and attribution are among the biggest debates around filmmaking, and I know that some studios are developing proprietary clean models to address these legal concerns, while others are sort of like fine-tuning AI based on other artists' works, which is a big gray area at the moment. Like, not get all lawyery, but we could agree it's a gray area. So how do you see this evolving?
I mean, it's funny, Ben and I were talking a lot about this the other day. I mean, there's a lot of stakeholders in this conversation. I think arguably the most important are, artists that feel entitled to things that they created. But then you also have like artists that are, whether they're new to being in a world that has IP in it, some people that just pick up a guitar and play it don't think about whether or not they're ever infringing on somebody's rights as the music they're playing. I think there's some people that are picking up these tools and are just making stuff. Those people have a voice in some of these conversations. I think the distributors have a voice because there's a business being exchanged when people are, acquiring content and then trying to exploit it. So there's a lot of different voices in this. I think the thing that interests me the most is the consumers at some point. It's like, well, all of this stuff, especially when it comes to intellectual property that has value, that is worth something, and it's worth having a lawyer be paid to defend your position or argue against it. What do the consumers do? Which direction do they go? And so to bring it back to the models, we're in a very interesting primordial state of this marketplace that I think some of us that spend a lot of time, staring at this stuff, you might notice that there's a lot of very well-received videos made with tools like Kling or Hailuo, which even putting the implied geopolitics that some people also think about, those are countries that seem to be behaving very differently in their interaction with data and the content that their models live off of. And on the other extreme, we're seeing, the Adobe Fireflies launching that are, I think there's even a qualifier that it's not fully clean, but it's pretty clean, or at least I've seen some people qualify it. And then as of in this last week, I think it's pronounced Mary, but the product that Moon Valley and the team at Asteria here in LA are really proudly presenting an ethical, clean model that they will stand behind it in a big way, and they'll be on CBS Sunday Morning News talk shows talking about it. They're very proudly telling the world that they have something that is fully licensed. It is fully clean. There's for all the concerns that have been voiced so loudly, they're on the good side of it. So the options are presenting themselves to the creator community. I think they're actually really, if I read through the fine print of their presentations, they're actually very much targeting big studio partners, people that are doing what they might call it, high-end professional work. So it doesn't sound like a cheap product, to go back to your comment about which things are Fisher Price and which things aren't. But, so I think all of that is happening, but there's a flood the zone feeling if somebody's paying attention to what's happening on X or on YouTube or in places where the content is just out there. There's a lot of people, even maybe dangerously spending a lot of time doing deep fakes and, celebrity deep fakes and things that there's even a lot of pushback on. So I'm just saying this is the consumer market. It's no longer gate kept. It's no longer highly curated by who gets to decide what's on TV. So if that's the environment that all of this stuff is being litigated in, I'm just really curious, how does it all really end, knowing that the consumer's got a lot of power over where the money flows, where the choices get made. So I think that's a really messy subject area for that reason, is that at some point all of this is there because it presumes this is how value flows from one side of the process to the other. In the sort of controlled setting of this that is in the current landscape of TV and film, there's, from what I can tell, there's TV networks that are starting to really look at this stuff and seeing opportunity. I think they are very curious what type of enterprise licenses the creators they're working with are using, whether there's possibly an adherence to ethical models. So I think that becomes a gate to be kept, that we'll see how many people go to that gate to watch content, and I think in some ways you could point to the fact that a lot of these TV networks have very, very old audiences. The median age of cable TV is like 60 plus. So what does that really mean in terms of the future of this? Is a really good question. They have a lot of power. They're at the center of a lot of press and a lot of what seems to be influence in the direction. But at some point, the economics of their business, the demographics of their business, doesn't seem to be broad to sort of complete that answer.
Yeah.
So I think ultimately it's like, I think there will be lawsuits settling in the next year or so that I think will start to create things like press. And I think there'll be a very kind of simple rules of the road, most likely.
Yeah, it's a messy subject, and one thing I've seen you guys say on many of the interviews you gave, but also in conversations we've had, this is evolving really fast. So at a certain point, we're all trying to catch up. Like, we can have this conversation as folks that are involved in the environment, and still, I don't think anyone that is realistic can say, I know exactly how this is going to play out. We might have like strong indicators or what story has shown about previous innovation, but we don't know how this might play out. And I can see, like you said, bigger studios being a bit more conservative because also they have a much better shot at getting sued than if I grab Batman and create my own AI film. Like, no one cares about what I'm going to do.
Well, that specific example, I think he got taken down.
There you go. See, well, never mind. I don't know anything. Now, speaking of things that hopefully won't be taken down, I know both of you were very involved with a feature-length film called AI Wonderland that blends live action, animation, and AI-generated visuals. And you folks put this film together. I mean, I know Jagger Waters was involved, who's been on the podcast. Reza 605, who's been on the podcast, was involved as well. But you guys were working with different artists on each scene all over the world. Now, Min, first of all, how do you handle 25 different artists working on the same creative project?
Well, first, I think you should definitely talk to Nem because he's the executive producer and it has this vision that we E2 remake, which was an amazing kind of time capsule of a project where in some ways, in many ways, the AI tools of that era are, don't age well into this era, right? Because the progress has been made in a year is just staggering. Nobody I know really could predict how fast it would have moved. And in that project, I believe Nem was organizing like 40 to 50 artists, right, in one project, which is staggering on its own. And so Nem brings a lot of that sensibility. into this project, right? He really knows how to, corral the artists, keep the momentum going and all of that. I think it really was nowadays we know hundreds, if not thousands of artists in the space, right? Who are operating at a professional level. And now the question is, how do you choose which ones who are not busy also? Because in less than a year, you had people who were just trying to play with AI and now suddenly are full-time AI artists and professionals because, hey, the demand is really high for them to work on projects very rapidly, right? And so that has been a balance that we've been navigating. And then it comes down to, hey, let's create activities. Let's, come up with this trailer. We have to hit on a schedule here. We have to make sure that we're jumping on phone calls or Zooms or what have you to, corral the group, foster a sense of community. Everything happens in a group chat or a Discord, at least for me these days, especially with all the artists operating from everywhere. And so, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And I think really there is a value in, starting to develop a culture around what people can do and all of that. And so I think that is kind of one of the strengths of Nem, of Fred, of Reza and Jagger and Max and others who are in the project, of really kind of like we all come from last year, really. We all come from last year's AI culture movement, and we all believe in it. We all believe in that this is going to change the way we approach entertainment. And we believe that projects like this have an impact because, hey, you get 30 artists together to make a film. This is something really special and significant, and we can do some things that no one else has done before.
To me, what I'm most enjoying, I mean, this was an idea that came together that, the T2 team were kind of looking for their next, like what Nem calls this exquisite corpse model of production. And we sort of threw in this idea of thinking about public domain and, Alice is this perfect subject. And it's also this kismet of like the way the title is Alice in AI, so AI Wonderland. So it just worked out. But I find a lot of, having been around a lot of TV and film production, I more think like a producer. In the end, it's like I'm less sort of married to the creative direction process. I always like working with creatives. And I really like observing how Nem operates. Nem is, he's just a really modern idea of a producer. And I think that to me has been my big takeaway, is that because the medium is very liquid, because the technology itself is very nimble. It's not settled. We're not done figuring out how this stuff works. There's something inherently fast, but also very like zen about adapting to the choices that normally are very rigid and straightforward and linear. So that's something that I've taken away, even as far as we've gotten into it so far.
Okay, so Fred, you're bringing up something that, again, it's something that I'm hearing for the first time, which is talking about, the role of the producer, because we talk about AI creating jobs, removing or deleting jobs, but now we're talking about also evolution, right? And you talk about Nem. Hi, Nem, we haven't met, but like I look forward to having you on the podcast. You talk about Nem being this sort of new type of producer, right? And you talk about AI being super liquid, so there's some flexibility involved. But also, if I put my producer hat on, I would say, kind of like that's what a producer has done all, through time, right? Like put out fires, set up to what's happening. So was there any specific like added value to what you think is this new sort of producer, right? Beyond being liquid and flexible and open to new ideas, what's the kind of thing that you think will make a producer successful when working in AI projects?
I mean, I think you've added it to the list of what we've already said, but I think probably the big one is this idea of being nimble. I mean, I don't think that's how most people plan. Like if you build a house, you don't assume that maybe those 2x4s we just spent a lot of money on, we're going to have to swap them out halfway through. Like I think that's sort of becoming what a long-term project in AI can deal with, and not even necessarily as a problem. It's not even like a bad thing that we decided to swap out 2x4s. Like it might be a good thing that we've actually discovered that this new 3D tool over here completely changes the way we've been doing these, these action scenes. So I think that is where it's less of, I think producing is almost historically problem solving and troubleshooting and sort of crunching numbers. It's always these sort of things that sound like I'm furrowing my brow, I'm producing. I think there's actually this very like flow state to the creative producing part of it, that you are entering this opportunity to think differently at all times. And I think that's I think there's a lot of people that in some ways they're very good at producing because they are not that personality type. I think they actually succeed by being sort of like, what we might call the adult in the room. And I think there's sort of a wave of innovation here that some of the most interesting things that are going to come out of this are going to come from being looser and faster with what you have to do. At the end of the day, there's money and there's timelines and there's people working hard and deals, and there's still things that require being adult-like. But I think the creative process is entering a very fun phase.
Yeah,
I
I'm
will
seeing
say-
an opportunity there. Oh, sorry, man. Go
I
ahead.
will add that I think AI producers, at least how I see them modeling it, is that they have to themselves be creators. Like they themselves have to be on the very edge of what is possible and therefore be able to lead. I mean, like, look, Alice in Wonderland, we started last year, right? We've been working on it for a while. Everything has changed, right? Obviously, like we said earlier, it's a day-to-day thing. And so as a result, we have to also be projecting out to where things will end up. Right, which is why we're looking at, hey, how do we do this kind of unique thing where we place someone in the video, which is something that is going to be more possible, right, by the time we release the video in the summer or the film in the summer. I think it's like when I think about this, I think about architects a lot, which is kind of ironic. Which is architects are interesting because they're multidisciplinary, right? They're mathematicians as well as artists at the same time, or physicists as well as painters at the same time in a certain way. And I listen to the speech of this very famous architect. I forget his name now, but he was building a project that would take 10 years to make. And so how does he think about the time horizon of his project? He thinks, well, I'm in, let's say, Singapore today, or I'm in San Francisco today in 2025. And I know that if I start my project today, the style of the city will have aged 10 years by the time my building is done. Therefore, I should probably look at the style of the city, 20 years from now or 30 years from now, and think about how my building arrives in where I think the city is. As a result, he has to talk to politicians, community activists, all these different people who represent the vibe and the culture of the city, the kind of art resulting from the city. And I think there is something to that AI producers and AI creators have to do as well. And honestly, I think, when we started Machine Cinema, we started with a lot of folks in the beginning who were not as involved in the AI creative process. And really, my preference has been to work with people who are themselves in the AI creator space, like to help have the community built by the community. Because there is something to understanding like the play and understanding what is possible with these tools and why they impact my life directly, right? And why that is meaningful for me, right? So I think there is something to that I really value,
I like that parallel you do with architects. Had not thought of that before, thinking like, okay, how it's going to look like, 10 years from now. So what do you think are the things that AI filmmakers or creatives should start preparing for today, kind of thinking about how the city is going to look in 10 years?
Actually, I'm curious what Fred's answer is going to be.
I mean, I'm close to like a lot of people that are starting to apply this to TV, which I always, to me, I relate more to the TV pipeline just by virtue of that's where I come from. But there's something about also having to do things in repetition. You have to do multiple episodes. You have to retain an audience, which I think is a different goal than making something once. Not that it's more or less valid, but I think it's an interesting puzzle. And because you have to think about timelines, you have to think about trajectories in different ways. And, one thing I'm noticing is, for example, like, in general, there's sort of an attitude of like when something is changing in this way, sometimes you just kind of like wait for it to settle. Like, I don't know, I'll just like wait for this all to figure itself out. And then there'll be some like awesome like Adobe Creative Suite that just kind of does everything. And I don't have to like constantly keep up with anything. I'll just go use that tool. So there's somebody that might be thinking to themselves, it's not there yet for me. To me, it's interesting how the people that are jumping in and saying, you know what, let's give this a go. They're sort of then dealing with the things that they want it to do, that it's not quite there yet. So like lip sync's like the big one. That like, I think the most bullish among us, like at some point you got to confess, like it doesn't look that great. Like it's really, really good. And man, it's so close and it's almost there. And sometimes you see it and you almost thought it was real, but I can't think of too many times that we've just been fully fooled. Right. But that's like, for people that are trying to make TV or really trying to make films. I mean, that was like a really big criticism that was leveled against the Staircase Studios. They just announced in the last week or so, and they really led with their chin. They put out the woman with the red hair. It's like this blacklist film that, that they really took, built a whole business model that we're going to buy a bunch of scripts and really make these things. And it seems like an amazing team over there. But you watch the film and it's, they really led with their chin. Like, it looks like there's some weird lips not doing human things. But I talk to like producers as they're like weighing the like, all right, are we there yet? Do we do this or not? And it's like, I don't know, like it's probable that in the time that we're all working on this, it will be here. you know, like that's how this stuff seems to be shipping. And so again, do you feel like you're in this nimble state that you just kind of go and then adapt, and then maybe you pull back on your film needing to have that many scenes that are so dialogue heavy if you get to make choices like that? Or is it possible that you're going to land in an amazing moment where it all works out? And so I think that risk taking seems to be reemerging, which is really interesting to me. Like that's not a word I associate with filmmaking or Hollywood lately. I think it's been very risk averse as a culture for a little while. I think that's almost hurt a lot of people's growth charts, you know.
Would you agree then, and this is a question for both of you, that one of the upsides then of AI is that it could benefit this creative risk taking? Do you think stuff will remain the same, you know, and while we could encourage risk taking we want, like what's your hunch here?
Like in terms of are you asking like, will the AI creative process and industry reward risk takers or not risk takers?
The stories we tell, right? Like, it's either a reboot or a superhero movie, or are we going to tell different stories that are not getting told?
I mean, I think we're going to see a lot more content, you know, and good and bad. You know, there's going to be more content coming out of, let's say, South America, Africa, India, East Asia, wherever, that we probably didn't see before. A lot of stories that, you know, it's just like it was too costly to do a high production value film or short film or whatever, right? And so I think both things might happen at the same time. And then I think the quality stuff is going to happen faster. Like the high quality stuff is going to happen faster. It's going to be bigger. I don't know. I guess I'm sometimes I look outside and I think, you know, what if I look outside the city and I think, what if every business that I'm looking at right now has a commercial? And maybe that's a dystopian future to some people, but maybe it's also kind of cool that like a mom and pop can have a Coca-Cola level commercial that they never could before. I think that's really interesting and really cool. I also think that AI artists do have to, unfortunately for them, have to be on top of whatever is happening next, right? And so in order to be innovating at that level where they're doing the latest kind of stuff, they have to always be on top of what's happening right now, right? Or happening within a few years of now, right? And back to that question, I think, hey, what does this all look like? I think the weird thing is that for some reason, all the video model AI companies and image AI companies are so obsessed with Hollywood for some strange reason. Maybe Hollywood has seduced them, you know, and maybe it's seduced us all because right now we're talking about Hollywood. But maybe the opportunity is in marketing and advertising, right? And creator economy. And maybe there's all sorts of things that Hollywood currently does, like theater and formerly DVD sales and streaming, that are actually not that interesting long-term. And maybe it's video games, and maybe it's XR, maybe it's immersive experiences, maybe it's merchandise, what the creator economy folks are doing, right? Like, what is that range of things that AI is going to enable or people are going to be forced to do, right? In order to deal with that. So yeah, those are all the things that I kind of ruminate on when I think about this.
I mean, when you think about the work you and Fred are doing with machine cinema, how do you think you folks are contributing to maybe the AI filmmaking? I mean, I don't know if the word's being taken seriously because there's a lot of people taking it seriously, but like elevating the output of what can be done. Like, how do you think you folks are contributing to the community and what you're doing right now?
I thought Fred was going to ask Fred.
I thought he pointed that question to you, man.
I guess with machine cinema, I think in a lot of ways, I really want us to be like one of the communities that you go to, that you think of when you think of, there's a global community of AI creators and artists and filmmakers who are trying to figure it out. And I can parachute into this world through machine cinema, and I can meet other people who are like-minded, who are maybe they're beginners, or maybe they're intermediate, maybe they're advanced, or whatever that means, or however we grade that, right? Because the gradations are going to get really confusing. So like, I hope that that's what we become for people, is a way to jump in that's really easy, and people want to also contribute, you know, and help us build it together because they see the value of them being a part of it. And I think we're kind of in that, you know, in that kind of domino effect where we do a lot of events, and Fred can articulate really well, like the AIRL mindset of like, hey, we do these events. These are maybe the best way to get to know AI because you're meeting other new friends in person and you are treating AI as this collaboration, right? It's not like I go into painting class and I have a brush. It's not just like that. It is to some extent, right? Where I'm meeting other people and I get to sit there and watch what they painted and I get to paint something too. but it's also like, hey, this paintbrush also gets to talk to me, right? Or it's much more interactive, and I get to, with other people, interact with this AI, and there's a kind of a dialogue that happens between me and Fred and this other person sitting here and the AI, and we're trying to communicate to this thing that doesn't fully understand us. We're trying to get exact, and so like, and it's talking to us in videos and images, you know, and I think that there is something exciting there that we really lean into. We really want to be, you know, at least I want to be everywhere. I want to be able to do our events in Bombay or in Seoul, which we've done, and Tokyo, which we're doing next week, and then maybe in Dubai, whatever. Like, I really want to, you know, be there for people who are just jumping into that space and getting their feet wet.
Fred, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the part that has always appealed to me, I mean, just as very selfishly, you know, when we really were just doing this for starters, of just inviting people to come over and hang out and play with their laptops. I mean, it's just on some basic level networking. But like, what is networking? You know, like what are a lot of us who are in sort of transitional career states because of what's going on with media, what's been going on with other sectors, you know, this sort of LinkedIn life or this Instagram life, like, you know, we sort of are this worry that people have about AI, that we're all becoming these like lonely, just sort of like servicing the technology. Like, I don't know, there's this very real emotion, the word that keeps coming back up. And I think there's just, you know, networking and actually connecting with other humans. Like, that's actually how your next job will probably come out versus you just blasting your resume all over the internet. And so very selfishly, to me, this was an initial way to just start connecting with more people and learning and just walking into it with that kind of humility. And then as we just realized that we weren't alone, a lot of us were curious. A lot of us, you know, found something in this. Then it started to reveal this other dynamic that I think is even in more recent days felt more apparent to me at our events, is that like the technology has gotten very good. Like, it's really fun to watch what people can make in a short amount of time. Like, it's not a fully complete thought, like a film that you lived with for a week or longer, but it's something that 4 people grind it out in 4 hours. And like that friction of having to do it, having to meet strangers and figure out how to work with them, taking like the parameters of a challenge and not just whatever you want to do, like just all those things are almost like antithetical to what AI does on its own, which is, it's like this sort of slippery infinity. In some ways, that collision of this is humans doing our thing, we're in person, we're together, with this amazing new kind of magic box, this amazing new pixie dust that you can kind of do things that, like Min says, you first interact with Midjourney or any of these tools, like there's like a gateway drug feeling that you're like, I want more of this. That kind of chemistry set's really cool. And I think by giving people that moment, I think a lot of people step out of their comfort zones. A lot of people start at a later stage in life. Some people are coming at this having built media careers. They're like, wait, I'm still learning. That's like a new feeling for a lot of people, you know, that feeling of discovery again, to sort of like crack those eggs together. But I don't know, I feel that there's this inherent chaos to it, that almost like if it ever gets too smooth, there's something wrong when we're doing these events. But yeah.
Yeah, no, one of the things I gotta say, you know, I was lucky enough to attend one of the events you guys put together in LA a couple of weeks ago. One of the things I liked the most definitely was the creative muscle being shown by people, how friendly everyone was. You know, I'm actually a pretty shy in person, and people were walking to me like, hi, I'm this and that, and I do this, who are you? You know, just asking 10,000 questions, which was making it actually really easy to meet new people. Some of them I'm talking to this day because we actually got along really well in this 3-hour jam where we had to get together with people we didn't know and create a commercial. So that was super fun. So if you're in LA or any of the other cities, definitely recommend you folks attend this Machine Cinema events. And Fred, where can folks actually learn about the stuff you're doing so they can attend events, get involved with the community? How do we get them to talk to you guys?
We use pigeons mostly, and then if you're in the right place for the pigeon, then you're in the right place at the right time. No, we have
exclusively a certain type of pigeon, though. By the way,
no, but we do have I mean, then the pigeon can only reach you, so then you've got that
exclusive.
So what's the velocity of the pigeon, though?
You know, I don't know where this metaphor is going now.
It was a Monty Python reference there.
Sorry,
maybe I'm old.
Noted. Yeah. Touche, sir. Thank you for the pop quiz fail. No, we have a website. It's called machinecinema.ai. We have reasonably well trafficked Instagram and LinkedIn, but I think we really tried to just use our word of mouth here in LA. I think there's been these amazing attendees that, we even find ourselves on these Luma kind of, sort of events happening around town, and it seems to catch buzz. But I think we'll professionalize this even bigger as Min wants to take over the world. There'll be more internet involved. But so far, using humans to connect with other humans works really well.
No, it is good, man. I mean, we should all be trying. I mean, involving more people to take over the world. I think,
hey,
good stuff will come out, Then again, some people feel that way, and here's where we are. But don't get me started.
I mean, we think I think we've always kind of thought that, at least 2 years ago, always, but 2 years ago, we started thinking, hey, this is a global thing, that this phenomenon of, what Runway can do, or what Sora can do, or what Midjourney can do, are things that everybody should be able to play with, and that it unlocks the creativity for everybody in a certain way. That now I can have a relationship with, in some ways, I kind of felt like humanity was my paintbrush. That everything that has been artistically created is now available to me to co-create, and so I feel like the invitation is to bring in everybody.
So for folks that want to join the Machine Cinema team, or the community, actually, that's the word, the Machine Cinema community, we'll have all the links in the description. Doesn't matter if you're watching on YouTube, listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. Links down here. So folks, this has been amazing. I love how we talk about community, how we talk about the new tools, but from a storytelling aspect, from a creating something new and great rather than regurgitate. So I think folks that are creative will find lots in this episode to get started, and hopefully, get past the overwhelm, which is very normal to feel. So yeah, I appreciate you both joining. For those of you that are watching, if you're listening in Spotify or Apple Podcasts, a review goes a long way in helping us reach more folks. If you are in YouTube, subscribe, like. That helps a lot, folks. So let's hit that subscribe button. And my name is Juan Faisal. This has been Creativity and Robots with Fred Greenstein and Min Do from Machine Cinema. And thank you all. I'll see you next week.
Amo la creación en mi pantalla, bits y bytes en danza, todo brilla, cada código que escribo canta. Sabor a cumbia.